redo the thing.
All
Yeah.
right. What do
So
we do?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
so tell us, yeah, what you do
yeah.
so
So
we can
yeah.
know
These
more
days,
about you. Mhm.
yeah. So my name is Ryan Christensen. I'm a hypnotist. I actually came at this from sort of a different angle because my background is in intelligence work and national security work rather than psychology. I basically got into this mostly to fix my own head because all the normal techniques really weren't working for me. It turns out that I have autism, bipolar disorder. Didn't know that until last year. And so a lot of what I was really realizing is that pretty much everything we use out there makes things better, but nothing actually fixes the real problem.
Mhm.
Most of the stuff that we're looking at when we're talking about mindset work and self-improvement is either a very conscious technique, right? It's either skills you can use to do time management, journaling, those kinds of things. It's talk therapy of various kinds, somatic work. It's different frameworks along those lines, right? Stuff you can do on your own, cold plunges, meditation, things like that. Or you're going into the biohacking space where you're looking at the various neurotransmitters, you're looking at like managing your dopamine and serotonin with various supplements and so forth and so on. And everybody's kind of ignoring that big piece in between, which is your subconscious mind. That's a part of your mind that's running like roughly 90% of your life or more. And part of the reason for that is there's really only two ways to get down there, and that's psychedelics and hypnosis. Psychedelics, of course, are very powerful. They've been a big part of my journey and really made a big difference for me, but they also take you on their own ride. You don't really have any choice about what you're going to work on. So it shows you what it chooses to show you, and you have very limited ability to do a lot of work and change while you're down there because you're only bringing in your own tools and you don't have a lot of support while you're down there. Once you're back, now you're playing in that conscious place again, where you're just really sort of trying to understand and integrate and figure out how to make better choices based on what you now know. Hypnosis is a tool that gives us that direct, targeted, sustained access to your unconscious mind, right? We get to open the door to that place and go down there and actually do the work we want to do. But even there, most of the typical hypnosis work is around persuasion and suggestion. I'm going to open up that door, throw a bunch of good stuff in there, and hope it sticks, right? Tell you how awesome you are. It's kind of like affirmations on steroids, right? Much more powerful, but very limited because you're essentially adding a new belief system that has to compete with an old belief system. That old belief system has a lifetime worth of evidence, and usually it wins out over time. So you can make some minor changes. You can change like individual habits, things like smoking is really good for. But if you're trying to make these like big, pervasive, kind of life altering changes, it's very difficult to do it that way.
Mhm.
So the thing that I do different is I'm looking more at the beliefs and the assumptions that drive these different behaviors. Because if
Mhm.
there's a pattern of behavior, there's a mechanism that drives it, right? There's a purpose to it. Your mind is doing it for a reason. And rather than doing it from a persuasion perspective, I do it more from an intelligence perspective. I've got access to everything that's going on in the back of your head. Every answer I need is down there. So rather than guess, I'm like, okay, show me. You're doing this pattern. This thing's happening for a reason. Show me the problem you're trying to solve, right? Because there's a
Mhm.
series of logic, there's a series of events that drew that conclusion. If I have to do this, great, show me what that is. And once I understand what that chain of logic is, I can then go ahead and disprove that old chain of logic, take apart that old belief set, and create a new chain of logic that draws a different conclusion from the same data, right? We understood these things this way when we were a kid. We understand it a different way when we're an adult, but your unconscious mind isn't updating that just because you know it, right? It doesn't really have time. It's concerned about that like instantaneous now, so it doesn't have that time to step back and take another look at things. With hypnosis, we get to put time on pause in a way, and we actually get to go down there and help it understand things in a different way at that very fundamental level. The other thing that's different about what I do is I focus on the right brain perspectives rather than left brain. Your mind is looking at the world through two different perspectives, through two different lenses simultaneously. It's looking at the trees as well as the forest. Your left brain is looking at the individual events, individual problems, details, that kind of thing, whereas your right brain is looking at patterns over time.
Mhm.
It's looking at the stories that run through things, and it's faster. Okay, so that part of your mind will reach its conclusion first and actually kind of sets the frame through which we interpret all this stuff, which is why we always have to fight things like, I'm not good enough, that I don't deserve. We've made that conclusion on an emotional level, and then we have to find evidence to counter that down here. But if we can figure out where I'm not good enough as sort of a meta narrative comes from, as sort of a meta belief, then we can change I'm not good enough to I am good enough. Now we're interpreting everything here through the lens of I am good enough, right? And it makes everything easier. So by targeting those larger beliefs, you can actually make huge shifts in your life in a very short amount of time because you're taking care of the big themes rather than trying to deal with individual, instead of trying to cut down trees, you're dealing with the forest as a whole.
Yeah, amazing. So, what is the fastest way to replace those beliefs, reprogram that subconscious mind?
So unfortunately, it's something that it's really hard to do on your own. If you're in conflict with your mind, that means your mind doesn't trust you. So why is it going to listen to you, right? And the other thing is, usually a lot of the changes we want to make are to allow us to do things that your mind thinks is dangerous, bad, or wrong in some way. So it's very resistant to that kind of thing of trying to reprogram on your own. That's why you need somebody else to kind of do that work for you. You have to have sort of the third party, neutral third party come in and sit down and say, okay, what's the problem here, and negotiate a new solution between the two parties. But typically, I'm able to get people some major changes in about 3 or 4 sessions. It really doesn't take very long because you're dealing with the larger, dealing with those larger themes, and you're actually figuring out what that was that created it instead of having to guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the fastest way is through hypnotherapy.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, and the reason why is you don't have access to that stuff from a conscious level, right? When we're in our conscious mind, we're looking at those individual events. We're like, oh, this is the problem. Great. That's not going to show you this bigger pattern, right? You can map out Times Square in New York with excruciating detail down the inch, and that's going to tell you absolutely nothing about what things look like from the air. I can tell you what it looks like New York City as a whole looks like from the air. So you have to be essentially going to that larger pattern directly to figure out what that thing directly is, right? And there's no way to know that from your conscious space. The only two ways again, psychedelics and hypnosis. Psychedelics, you can't do that sort of targeted work. You can't say, I want to go look at this. It's going to take you on whatever ride it wants to, right? And if you want to just go somewhere else, you have to fight that, which is just horribly unproductive. Hypnosis is really the only tool that lets us get down there in a targeted, directed way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like a fastest way, yeah, because there is another way through repetition, as all our beliefs were set initially through repetition, because we heard it so many times from parents, from teachers, and through repetition we started believing that it is true, and we accept it is true. And so when we want to create any new ideas, again we have to repeat them again and again, like old school, like Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow. Bob
Yes.
Proctor was my mentor. So that school is very powerful, yes, but it requires a lot of discipline. Yes, like you create
Yes.
new ideas and you have to listen to, like, record it, listen every 3 hours, read it, rewrite it every day. You can write it 100 times every day,
Yep.
just to, and as soon as you repeat it regularly, subconscious mind start to believe, right? Like these ideas become more realistic, and then you start believing it, and when you believe, you already see yourself there. This is how things start to change. And as you said, the hypnotherapy is just the fastest way how a person can get, as you said, 3 4
Yeah.
sessions, and he can get those results. But how how long this change happens? Because for example, in first way, when person repeats it and he makes himself and his subconscious mind to be convinced that it is him, this process happening when he grows, he changes his self-image, he see himself already as he is capable and he can do it, and also the way he gets some wins on that way that shows him that it is true. So in this case with hypnotherapy, like the person comes for 3 4 sessions, he didn't change anything in his life. I mean, habits didn't change, his thought didn't change. Yeah, so how this result really lasts and how it works? Does it work for everyone, or people have to be committed again to do something on themselves? Because I believe that everything comes
Let
from
me explain what's happening here. Okay,
Mhm.
so one of the principles we have in hypnosis is this idea of the critical factor. And it's kind of like the wall between your conscious and the unconscious mind. And what it says is that your unconscious only believes things that match what it judges true and false based on what it already believes. So if it's the same, it's true, it comes on in, it gets accepted. If it's false, if it doesn't match as false by definition, it gets ignored. This is why it takes so much time and energy and effort to shift the subconscious belief through repetition. Okay, because you essentially have to prove over and over and over and over and over and over again. And essentially what you're doing is you're not proving the old belief wrong. You're saying, I have to live this new belief instead. You're not getting rid of the old one. Okay, so what you're really doing is just chopping out a small clearing in the forest. You're chopping down some trees, creating some space, right? And that's awesome. It gives you more freedom of movement, gives you more in the direction you want to go. You're essentially telling your mind, I need to go this way. I essentially can't live if I'm not going this direction, right? I don't like who I am. I have to be somebody else. You're telling your mind, I can't be this, I can't live this life, I have to live a different life, okay? That creates some very difficult things because fundamentally you're saying, I don't want to be who I am. I can't be me, right? I have to be someone else, right? Which is essentially denying what you are and trying to build a different version that's more acceptable to you, right? And that requires constant effort. That requires constant reinforcement, because you can't let yourself go back in any way, shape, or form, right? Which is that constant repetition that you have to do. It's why it takes so long to build, okay? On the other hand, if you're going down there in hypnosis, what you're doing is you're not saying, I have to be somebody else. You're saying, I want to make it okay to be what I am so that I can go do what I want, okay? You're not creating an identity around who you're going to be. You're saying, I'm going to, create this space where I'm going to clear out all the junk, clear out all the mess, get everything in line, get every part of me on the same team, and then I'm going to take that new unified self and move through the world, okay? So it's not about creating a new identity, because you don't need one. Who you are is good enough. What you are is good enough. You've already got all the tools you need. It's just that some things are off limits because your mind thinks they're bad, wrong, dangerous in some way. So rather than trying to create a new danger of being you, because that's essentially what you're doing, is saying it's too painful to be me. Being me is dangerous in some way, shape, or form. So I have to be this other thing, which is what you're doing with this, the normal techniques around affirmations and identities and so forth and so on. You're saying it's going to be safe to be me, and then I can go do whatever I want. Okay. And when you're talking about this habit repetition thing, you can think of it as like, over time, you repeat stuff so long, it like builds this highway in your mind, right? And everybody says, oh, well, we have to like take apart that highway and build a new highway. That's why everybody thinks it takes so long to rebuild this stuff. It's like, well, that's one way to go about it, right? But that whole chain is based on something that initiates it, right? There's an on-ramp that takes you onto that, right? So why not just take off that on-ramp, build an on-ramp over here? You don't have to do anything work to dismantle that at all. You just build a new one. Once it's no longer necessary to hold you back, once you clear out all the problems that are making it difficult for you to live the life you want, all that old stuff kind of falls away, and it's just a matter of just building new stuff, right? So you don't have to go through that effort of constantly repeating and constantly taking apart and constantly dealing with all these little individual issues, because you set the larger frame that makes that possible.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I totally agree. And also, I have this perception that our DNA is perfect. Yes, so it is not that we want to become the new person who we are not. I think that because we want to become that person, it means that we are that person already, but we have so many viruses, yes, all this, as you said, junk, which we have just to remove, yes, all those
Right.
beliefs which were imposed to us by other people. So we also genetically we inherited, yes, something from our ancestors. This is why we look so like our parents and relatives. Yes, so I think that this our spiritual part is always looking for to expand and to be expressed. And when people are looking for the personal growth, why people look for personal growth? Because they have that spiritual being inside that wants to be more, have more. Yes,
Yes.
so when it comes to building identity, it is not about yeah, just from my perspective, yeah, it is not about becoming somebody new. It is really studying yourself and knowing more about you, who you really are. Not that what other people told you who you are, but really study yourself and becoming that person who you already are, but you who you didn't discover yet before. Yeah, so this personal development, it is not about uh, taking some other people personalities. It is more about understanding who you really are, what are your strengths, what are your unique talents and gifts, what you really want to do in life, and building this personality yourself. Because before, when you are not consciousness, when you're not conscious about yourself, yes, because as more people are just conditioned to think certain way, feeling certain way, act certain way, and like most of our behavior is habitual. Yeah, so people live in that patterns, and those patterns mostly is not what they choose, because when they were
Let me
small, right, they
let
were
me let me
owned.
let me offer a different perspective, okay? Because this is a very, very common framework that a lot of people navigate by. And in my perception, the way I've the way I've come to understand things and with the work I've done with other people, it's completely wrong. Okay. And the reason why I say that is a couple of different things. Number one, I completely agree with you. There's a spiritual self, there's a soul, there is a inherent you that is wanting to be expressed most fully. 100% on board with that, right? What happens when we're young is we don't get conditioned, we don't get programmed. None of that happens. Every single person is is creating their own meaning about what's happening in their world. Okay. Now, you're going to obviously do that in the context of your environment, and the more harsh your environment, the more limited that the opportunity is to draw different conclusions, right? Especially, Eastern Europe, Russia, much harsher environment than here in the U.S., right? And so it tends to be much more limiting in terms of what you're allowed or most likely to believe and derive, right? Cool. But the thing is, that's always your action. You're the one that decided to believe this. You're the one that came to this conclusion. There's a lot of environmental pressure to make this conclusion, yes, but it's still your choice, which means it's easy for you to choose something different if you do it the right way, right? That's part of why we have this idea that you have to do all this repetition stuff and convince yourself from the outside in. No, all this stuff was created from the inside out from the beginning. Doing it from the outside in is really hard. Doing it from the inside out is much easier. The other thing I would say is the only time you need to understand on a conscious level who and what you are is when you don't like the answers you're getting from down inside when you ask, right? When there's that conflict between who you feel you are and what you think you are, right? The way I see it is, one thing I'll ask my clients a lot of times is, what part of you is you, right? You've got your conscious mind, your rational mind, an emotional mind, got an instinctive mind, got your neurochemistry that plays with all those, got your physical body. Start talking about somatic work, you could have an emotional body. Get in the spiritual space, you got an energetic body, an astral body, you got a soul, right? Which of these is you? Fundamentally, of course, we're all of these. But because we identify so heavily with consciousness and rationality, we tend to perceive ourselves as that, and everything else is like not us, right? Or something other than what we really are. It's our subconscious mind that we have to fight, so forth and so on. And really, it's like we decided that we don't like these answers, so we want to create new ones. Habits are just a pattern of behavior we've decided to do. It wasn't that we did it a lot and therefore it stuck. It's like, no, we realized we had a challenge and we repeatedly used the same solution. Okay. So it started with the solution, and then that just solution repeated over time. But because we don't like what we're hearing from the inside out, we keep on trying to figure out how to change things from the outside in. And to do that, we have to bring it conscious first and then try and make it unconscious. Okay. But once you create that space where you're allowed to be what you really are, without having to know actually what that is, then something really interesting changes. Because if you look at self as that whole combination of all this, it's not possible to reduce that down to something that the human mind can actually understand, much less something simple enough for consciousness to understand. Okay. But when you're not fighting yourself, you're essentially saying, okay, I'm going to allow every part of myself to do its job. Okay. If you look at the mind as like a company where the consciousness is like the CEO, your rational mind is like your upper managers, your emotional mind is like your middle management, and like your instinctive mind is its worker bees, right? Like the accountants and dock workers and so forth, right? Each of those departments has a job to do, right? Now, if you don't like what they're doing as a CEO, you start trying to micromanage, make everything happen yourself because you don't like it and you don't trust them, right? But once you build that as a unified team and everybody's on the same page, then you can let them do their job. And then identity becomes a situation where you're just being you and trusting that the truest aspects of yourself are coming through without trying to think of who am I supposed to be or what am I supposed to be doing, right? You just simply get to do. And that actually opens up so much more space to take action more freely and more frictionlessly. And it frees you from the supposition of what you need to be or who you need to become in order to have a certain thing in your life. It's just, do I want to get that or not?
Yeah, it is really very, very interesting, to know and to study yourself. And
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
yeah, so it is really great to know, to study yourself, and to know that so many different parts, like orchestra,
Yeah.
so many
Yeah.
different instruments, and you have to maintain all those instruments that they all can work together like a very good professional
Yeah.
orchestra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like, it's not up to the conductor to make sure they're all doing their job. They've all got the job, they got the sheet music, they're all playing their part, and you're just there to kind of keep them all on beat together. right? If the conductor's trying to figure out how to make everybody do that, that's always a mess, and that's like what we're always doing when we're fighting ourselves, right? We're trying to micromanage and do all the little parts. It's like, no, that's not your job. You step back and let them do their thing. If they're not doing what you want them to be doing, you need to figure out why it is they're doing it, because fundamentally every part of you is helping you at all times. Wants the best for you, wants the most for you at all times. So if you're in your own way, if you're fighting yourself, if there's friction, those parts of you have a different idea of what needs to be done. So rather than trying to beat yourself into submission, maybe figure out what the problem is. Just figure out like how best to fix that problem.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, amazing. I really appreciate for what you do, that you help people to find the way to
Yeah,
organize their orchestra better, this I would say effortless way. Yes, because
yeah,
it can be a long journey, yes, through with a lot of discipline and commitment. And of course it is better to just to find an expert like you, and to get help, yes, to understand yourself better. And that also expert will help you to um, change those programs, yeah, because those
yeah,
programs so heavy, yes, and they
yeah,
control everything what we do, yes, those habits what we
yep,
do, because we are creatures of habit. The most activity we do habitual. Yeah,
yep.
so thank you so much, Ryan. It was great to meet you and also to have you on our podcast. And I'm looking forward to see you again in our future episodes.
Great. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.